What's up, everybody? This is the Reclamation, and I am Malia. Literally getting ready for this episode down here in my basement where I record. I was thinking of this really ironic. Is that the right word? It's ironic that a lot of people don't know what ironic means. Is that even right? So I was thinking of this statement because I'm in my basement and I was like, oh my gosh, it is cold down here. And the phrase that ran through my mind is it's cold as hell. And then I thought, but isn't hell like burning fire, brimstone? Isn't hell hot? So I thought it was really funny that we refer to hell as being cold and hot at the same time. And I think it's just like hell equals a place or situation or experience that we just don't want to be in. Kind of on that note, wow, that segued really nicely into the topic of today's podcast episode. In this episode, I really wanted to expand upon the idea of the previous episode, episode 44 with Kimber. We talk a lot about this idea of being present in every moment and allowing what is. And in that idea lies another one, which is letting go of control. We talk about that. So I really wanted to expand upon the idea because I feel like there's a lot here, a lot of really good nuggets of wisdom that have benefited my own life and really, really have changed the way that I experience life, the way that I move through life, the way that I take in life. So I wanted to expand on the whole idea. And the reason why the funny little metaphor of hell is cold, hell is hot, hell actually is just anything that we don't prefer is because that kind of goes into control. And we usually control because it is based off of a situation and experience of something that we've been through or perceive to be unpreferred, right? Okay. Now I'm taking off my jacket because the heater is doing its job. Okay, so expanding on this idea of allowing what is. And I want to begin this with everyone listening to this already knowing. I speak about this whole theme of allowing and letting go of control and understanding where is our fear coming from, all of that. I want to speak about it outside of any direct harm or abuse that may be happening in your life, in your relationships, in your experience. So this is not talking to those types of situations. I just want to be really, really clear about that. Sometimes there is a fine line. It's a bit hazy. What is abuse? What is direct harm? And as we get going in this episode, you'll understand like the body's response to fear is out of protection and safety. And so we just got to teach it a different way. But the line's a little hazy in the beginning of, am I experiencing direct harm and abuse? Or is this something that's an illusion and that I have made up out of a reaction that is happening within my body? Okay, let's get into it. Okay, I just did something so silly. I took a big swig of my Henry Weinard's root beer, just barely, to kind of just like take a breather here before we got into this episode. And it's a big mistake because now I'm going to have to be pausing for the bubbles that will be rising up out of my mouth. Before we go, I just want to lay down a disclaimer. I am recording this episode while my kids are home because I was tired this morning and I slept in. Therefore, the schedule got pushed. Therefore, here I am in the situation that I tried to avoid, but today was, I guess, not successful in avoiding that, but still able to get the episode in. All I'm saying is there may be background noise. Okay, so expanding upon episode 44, allowing, letting go, being present. I want to begin by just laying a foundation of what is our most common current experience living in the world that we live in, especially being like conditioned into a Western way of living, which is really about push and drive and hustle bustle. And we get into this place of stressing ourselves out into a state of mind that we can't see beyond the story that starts to be created. And the story that I want to specifically talk about is the stories of fear that we create. And because we can't see outside of this story of fear, we go into this perpetual state of survival mode. And some things that happen inside our body when we experience high states of fear or prolonged states of fear is a stress response. These stress responses are something you've all heard. It's very common language right now. It's the fight, the flight, the freeze, or the fawn. Automatic response that happens when our autonomic nervous system is triggered. Okay, and our body naturally, as it's designed to do, responds to a situation of fear with a higher heart rate, quicker breathing, blood flow shifts to areas of our body that are in need of it more, like away from our bowels and into our arms and our brain and our hands or our legs, so that we can fight, we can flight, we can freeze and hide, or we can act in a fawning way. And our pupils dilate as well, allowing more light in, allowing more information to get in. Essentially, the bodies respond to threat by tapping into our animalistic nature. Psychology calls it the old brain, and it is there to keep us alive. That's its job, and it's really good at its job. And so when this response comes, your body is in a state of looking for the source of fear. And it becomes hyper vigilant at that job with the blood flow and the eyes dilating and all of the response kicking in to keep you safe. Often, when we go into that, we don't fully come out of that. And our bodies can remain in this state of fear, this stress response. And it makes it harder to step out of fear and assess whether the perceived threat is real or imagined. So, because we're not well educated in how to work through things that are traumatizing, and I want to define trauma like this: it's anything that happens to us that is emotional and goes unresolved. Anything that happens to us that is emotional and goes unresolved causes trauma within our body, a wounding. When we experience something frightening that sends us into a stress response, our body does its job, kicks in, keeps us alive, but becomes trauma when it goes unresolved. And so many of us have carried within ourselves experiences or conditioning that have put us into this hypervigilant state, this constant stress response, because we were not able to come out of that stress response when it did happen. We weren't able to resolve the emotional experience. So because we're in this state and we kind of stay there and our body starts to just be there on the constant, the primal brain takes over. And what it does is it actually reinforces our perception of danger. We start to do this emotional looping. We stay in these patterns because we're always thinking something's out to get us. This thing that is happening is going to cause A, B, and C. And if I don't do this, then this bad thing over here will happen. And we're kind of like in this overdrive, but it becomes our constant state. So we're not so aware of it. It's a program that's just running really subconsciously. And so once we are into that primal brain and we've been in this state, it makes it really hard to step out of the fear to be able to assess whether the perceived threat is real or imagined. And here's where that line starts to get a little bit blurry when you begin this practice. I'm going to bet that most of us have had an experience where whatever happened, whether it was one time or an extended period of time, this experience put our bodies into a state of fear and a stress response state, which we stayed in. What becomes of us when we're in this state due to the fear that I have assumed or perceived will exist, the fearful thing? Well, one of the side effects of being in a perpetual stress response based off this fear is we seek to control our environment and outcomes. We feel safer knowing it's us who has the power because we know we can rely on ourselves. Control plays this massive role in how the human body reacts when it's in a state of fear. But that control is often an illusion, and it's created by our brain so that we can cope and continue surviving in our lives. Primally, okay, so this is like our animalistic nature. Primally, when the body senses danger, the instinct is to control the situation to ensure survival. Okay, so I've said this same thing in a few different ways. So I just want you to really understand that it's such a natural response that we have. And in it being a natural response that we have, often we don't understand that another side of that natural thing is to come back into a state of balance. But we are uneducated in how to do that. We kind of bypass and we override all of these experiences that happen to us that put us in fear and lead us to have control. So this need to control the situation to ensure survival, as we talked about, comes from that stress response of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And it can look like trying to fight off a perceived threat, running away, that's fleeing, freezing, and you stay undetected when you're freezing, and you can't be blamed for anything, and you just stay out of the way, right? Or you fawn, and you fawn to win safety, fawn to win love. Okay, so I want everyone to kind of take a beat with me and just self-reflect on this primal response. Stepping into it being the self-reflection with a state of like, just curious. I'm just curious. I'm not here to judge myself. I'm not here to call myself out, and nobody's going to get me in trouble for recognizing some things here. Where in your life might you be doing this? Might you be in fight? Might you be in flight, freeze, or fawn? A good place to start is checking in on your relationships. Those closest to you are really, really, really good at letting you know what's going on. You don't have to talk to anybody. You don't have to ask them directly. You can just self-reflect. And maybe there's nothing that comes up right now, but towards the end of this episode, I'll give you some tools that will help you during a time of trigger, and you can recognize what's going on in the moment. So when our bodies are in this stage of control and we're reactive and it's automatic, it's not thoughtful, it's not intentional, but it's this primal attempt to regain safety or to keep safety in our control, just subtly so reactionary. And our attempts at control show up out of fear, and it can look like controlling our environment and situations we find ourselves in, controlling others, an overextended practice of self-control as constant beratement of ourselves. Okay, so I want to give this fear-based, stressed out state of being a nod. If we think of our bodies and brain and the complex computing system that runs through it, we can see how these responses, these control responses, these stress responses, they make sense. It totally lines up with an intelligent system that senses itself in a state of danger. And when we can look at that as like, oh my goodness, thank you so much, you're doing your job. You're doing your job so well. In fact, you've been doing your job so well for so long, I'm going to relieve you of a lot of this responsibility that you've been carrying around that doesn't need to be carried around anymore. Thank you so much for doing your job. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for doing as you were designed to do. And as we give permission to that, we can move into giving permission also to ourselves for being in this state and acknowledgement of it, doing what's natural, we can also shift that over to this need to control everything out of fear and understanding how it was natural. Okay, so again, some of the examples of how we move into control because of a fear that may be perceived. Some of us control our surroundings and our environment. We become perfectionists. We're cleaning and organizing all of the time because it soothes our nervous system, and we feel like we're in charge of something tangible. I can ensure that my bathroom is always clean type thing. We become hyper vigilant in making sure that is so. And the flip side of that is that when it is not, what's our response there? What's going on there? What's our experience? And the experience of others around us who are receiving the effect of our need to ensure that that bathroom is always clean. We also try to control people's behaviors around us or their decisions so that we can avoid unexpected outcomes or outcomes that feel a little bit threatening to us. None of us want to be a caged tiger, though that's what we tend to become when we stay in this state of fear and needing to control. Another thing we often will do is we can control our own emotions. We suppress vulnerability. We suppress sadness. We suppress the need for help so that we can maintain this sense of power in not looking weak. And we can't let others know that there's something going on and there's a glitch in our own system. We control the way we are perceived. Okay, so that's just kind of a look at what's going on with our bodies, the natural responses that we are designed to have to keep us safe, and also what is the outcome of an extended period being in a state of fear and a state of stress, and how might that be playing in our lives. Each of us do it differently. Kimber and I, episode 44, we talked about releasing this control and stepping into a state of allowing. This is really where I wanted to expand upon because I think that it can sound real flowery and just like, oh, someone preaching something that is just filled with love and light and softness to counteract the harsh, craggy reality that exists within me. I want to expand upon this in a real practical way because I hope that it encourages people to experiment, because that's all it takes is some experimenting. So, releasing control, stepping into a state of allowing. Why should we do this? What are the benefits? I love to look at nature and see how it models balance and imbalance. So, for this particular topic, I want to look at a parasitical plant called mistletoe. I don't know how many of y'all know that mistletoe is actually a parasite that grows on a variety of trees, mostly hardwoods, and it chokes it out slowly, bringing it to its death. Mistletoe grows up the trunk and grows in these big, huge clumps up in the branches of these trees. And where the clumps are, the clumps of the mistletoe, you'll find swelling in the host tree where the growth is concentrated. Another thing that happens to the tree is its growth, its continued growth gets stunted. It shows signs of reduced strength or vigor. And as I said, it's slowly being killed off. The branches that the mistletoe from season to season will clump on will die. And so soon you'll have this tree that had been infested with the mistletoe over time not have viable branches anymore. So with the parasite growing on it and constricting its ability to grow, it's also lost its potential. It's essentially, the tree has lost its ability to grow to its potential and have available to itself all that it needs to accomplish that, to accomplish its potential growth. So our bodies in this way model nature, states of fear that are coped with by control. They'll produce in our bodies tightness, like literally in the muscles, the fascia, and organs of our bodies, especially the organs of the gut and the heart. They have this tightness that comes upon us. And also our perceptions, the way we look out at the world. When we move into control, because that's our coping mechanism for fear, our perspectives, our paradigms, they get really, really narrow and they close in. So you can think of that tree and everything that's happening to that tree because of the mistletoe is just like squeezing and tightening and choking it. And soon the tree is like, my only experience is that this mistletoe does this to me. So our perceptions, our paradigms narrow. So does our energetic systems. Our auras, the way that we interact energetically with all beings around us, it closes up because it perceives that there's threat all the time. So our whole self, it's closing up, causing this tightness that begins to choke out our ability to grow. Our natural state of who we are gets covered up and choked out by this fear state, which we feed. We feed that fear state with control. Okay, so Kimber and I chatted about in episode 44, we have both discovered the tightness that exists within our whole experience. And what I mean by that, again, is like organs, fascia, muscles, the brain power, our perceived cognitive function, the way that we think about things, and even our energetic systems around us. We knew that we were enacting control to help ourselves move through underlying fear. And oh my goodness, the many ways I've noticed I'm trying to control. And when I follow that thread of why am I controlling this? Why do I have a need to have this control energy towards this thing? It's mostly led to fear-based assumptions due to something I've experienced or something I've been conditioned to believe. Okay, I have to tell you, like, while I was preparing for this message to y'all, this episode, my youngest son, I really wanted him to go outside and play for a variety of reasons that were healthy. But the overarching reason led to me being in a reactionary state during our interaction, our battle that ensued, because he was taking forever to get outside. And he has these little friends that come over and want to play with him. And I am totally pushing him to get out there and play. And his friends are waiting and they're waiting. And my kid, he is taking so long. I mean, it starts to look like he is doing it on purpose, right? But really what's happening is because my need for him to do what I want him to do is growing, his natural state of moving at the speed he typically moves at looks to me to be something purposely done. And so, like, literally, as I'm typing out what I want to say to y'all, I am starting to feel that I'm pushing him to get outside. So I decide, okay, I need to do what I would coach anybody else to do and what I would share with y'all on this episode to do. And so I started to just, okay, I noticed very much that I am needing to control him. Why am I needing to control him? That's that follow-up question. You notice, there's the noticing. Then you ask the question, why? So my why was, I'm afraid his friends will leave because my son's taking so long. Then he won't have anyone to play with. And I need him to have someone to play with. And the tension in my body grew and grew the longer he took. It was like, you know, that saying where it's like, he gets under my skin. Well, that's exactly what's happening. It was like my skin, especially in my arms and my torso, was like crawling, and it was crawling with this just like, oh, what we want to happen is not happening, and the body is going into this response. Okay, so what if his friends leave? So what? Well, if they leave, I'm worried that they won't come back. He won't have anyone to play with today. And then that responsibility will fall on me to make sure he's entertained, or he will be a lonely kid that doesn't have friends. And I want him to be able to have friends. So I'm like pushing him into this situation for the sake of me needing him to have interaction with others, and for the sake of my fear that if he doesn't, then he won't. He won't. And I'm sure listening to me that you can hear the mental looping was that I was doing. And the longer you do that, the stronger it gets, and the more wild the story gets, and the more you convince yourself that that's true and it's gonna happen. Okay, so this is just a real simple example, and it's not necessarily something that's gonna drive me to states of control that are having damaging effects just this one instant. But these things are compounding, and they're little and slight and subtle and underlying. And all of this fear and all of this control boils down to, again, this design that we have to protect ourselves when we feel unsafe. So, how can I help myself and show myself that I am safe? By allowing what is. And remember, that's kind of what we're talking about, letting go of that control and allowing what is. How does that bring me into this neutral state, balanced state, where my body can know that it's safe? Essentially, this is where the practice of being present and teaching your body that it can be safe and that it is safe, you're basically rewiring the program that's been running ever since that fear response started. You're rewiring the program to show that you're safe and that you do not need to be in control of this situation in order to stay alive or in order to be safe. We can show our bodies and our systems that even though we're uncomfortable in this situation, and remember, this is outside of obvious threats to life and safety, that I'm uncomfortable in this situation, I can find safety and I can know that I am in control of myself. I can find safety within my body. And that comes through the practices of being present. And when you're present, you allow things to be as they are. Okay, so let's key in on this word of practice. And it's kind of like this act of talking ourselves off the cliff. And that happens in a moment of pause. Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search of Meaning, has this beautiful phrase. And he says, between stimulus and response, there is a pause, or there's space. And in that space, we have our ability to choose. And what we're choosing is our response. Okay, so this moment of talking ourselves off the cliff happens in that space. And that space starts off real small and it grows as we get good at this practice. And pretty soon the space isn't something that has to be taken because our response has changed. We've rewritten the story. So you begin with being in the space, and you cannot be in the space unless you take a pause. So you have the stimulus and you take the pause because you notice there's stimulus. That's huge and massive. People talk about noticing the trigger and noticing I'm in the trigger currently. So you notice the stimulus and you take the pause, and the pause starts with saying, ah, I can feel it. I can feel this rising sensation of something being under my skin. I can feel how it is causing me to want to take this action so that I can resolve this feeling under my skin. I can feel how my gut is tightening in this situation because outwardly, the situation that's happening, whatever it is reminding me of, is just causing my gut to tighten, and I'm wanting it to be resolved. And I know from previous experience that if I can step in and control this situation, then it helps to ease that tightening in my stomach. So you feel it and you name it. I'm in the stimulus, I'm in that trigger, and entering into the pause by feeling and naming what is going on. We're not overriding. We're not bypassing how we feel. It is so important to call out what's going on. One of the reasons why this is important is it starts to train your brain to pay attention to those sensations. Those sensations are messages. They're messages letting you know there's something bothersome happening to you within your system. And we can work with those messages to help us create a resolve to where that does not happen anymore. We're not getting these triggers throughout our body, these stress responses throughout our body. So number one, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel it. Feels like this. Feels like my face is getting really hot. Feels like the blood is rushing to my head. Feels like my back is tightening up. For me, it's major sensations in my arms and in my hands, which is not surprising because this is where action control exists. Is like my hands and my arms are going to take control of this situation. Then you ask that follow-up question and you discuss with yourself why that might be there. Why do I feel this sensation of something being under my skin in my arms and that my hands are just like clenching and they're wanting to do something about this? And you want to have that discussion with yourself in a way that you kind of keep asking why until you get to the point of this is why. And you'll feel it, you'll know it, that this is the deepest why I can come to. And your first why is going to be something so surface level. What's my first why? I want my kid to go outside and play really badly because, well, being outside in nature is healthy for him. Okay, that's really nice, but why is that causing me to have this need to control him to get out there? Okay, it's because I need some peace and quiet. And if he doesn't go outside, I won't have peace and quiet. Okay, but why is that? And I keep going till I land on the fact that I'm like, oh, I'm controlling this situation because I'm afraid of what those other boys will think. This is so silly. I mean, they're 8-year-olds. I'm afraid they're going to leave my child and they're going to leave my child and will cause A, B, and C for me to happen. Okay, and then the follow-up question to that is, why do I feel that way? Is this something that happened to me before? Or even, am I tired right now? And so this response to control the situation is stronger because I have less space, less patience, less room inside of my system to allow anything other than what is exactly right for me. Or am I hungry, aka hangry? Those two are very important questions to ask. So this is where our practice of presence can be a great tool. Because while those questions can help you to discover ultimately the why behind your triggers, sometimes it takes time to find and discover those whys. And the beginning of this starts with being present. You are feeling exactly how you feel, and you're sitting with that, and you're allowing it to be there, and you're not trying to get rid of it. Magic happens here. And it's the magic that unfolds because those feelings are messages, and your body will deliver them to your brain. Your organs will deliver them to your brain. Your unconscious will deliver it to your conscious when you get real present with what is going on within yourself. Another reason why practicing presence works really well here is often we get into states of fear and seek to control only in our mental space, only what's going on in our looping. And we're not actually having interactions with anybody. It's just our interaction with ourself. And we create a story. Often that story gets recreated throughout our lives as we continue to just stay in the looping of that. And we reaffirm to our bodies over and over and over that this is true and that this is what's real for us. And we get stuck and we stay there. If we can practice presence, we can remove ourselves from that looping, because often that looping is happening when we're doing tasks that are really mundane, really every day, and that don't take any real brain power to accomplish. A great example is doing the dishes or showering. So practice presence in those moments, as expressed in episode 44. When you find yourself looping, you can pull yourself out real quick by focusing on what you're doing and how it feels. I'm washing the dishes. The water feels warm. The scrubber in my hand, I can feel the wood grain of it as I put pressure on it on the dish. And you just are really walking yourself through exactly what's going on, the task and how it feels. This removes you from that looping and you're now in presence. This is a practice that increases into healing our automatic stress responses in high trigger situations. We just begin small and the body starts to recognize that here in this moment, everything is fine and I am good here in this moment. So a question you may have is it real? Can release really be found? Can better health really be found? Can happiness really be found through this process? I'm sure how aware you are that this teaching isn't new. This idea of letting go, this idea of allowing what is, this idea of being present in the now. It's not new. It's Eastern, it's Western, it's spiritual, it's psychology. It's taught all around all of those places. And I really like to study incorporate teachings that span all of these areas, because there's core wisdom that exists. And across all these teachings, the core wisdom is that control is often an illusion. And by resisting what is, we create unnecessary suffering. Let me go back to the example of my son. The longer and the harder that I pushed alongside and against, it's very interesting. It's like I'm pushing alongside this feeling of crawling sensation in my arms and this need to like control what's going on with my hands. And I'm pushing against it too, because that's a message being sent to me. And it's a message being sent to me that says, hey, we're having this response and you can learn what's going on here. So we don't have to have this response anymore. And we don't have to have this tension anymore. We don't have to be choked out anymore. But I'm not listening to it. So I'm pushing against, right? And I'm resisting what is. So in that moment, what is was me feeling this sensation that was driving me to behave in such a way as to continue to push my son out the door. And it doesn't create for a happy interaction, a happy experience, and a peaceful moment once he leaves. It's kind of just like the kid leaves and you're like, oh my gosh, right? And it's like the body can relax again, but it's not relaxing in a way that feels really grounded and really good. It's relaxing in a way that feels like, okay, I'm gonna let my guard down a bit, but I'm ready to go again when this trigger, when this stimulus comes into my life. Okay, so that's resisting what is. I was resisting the fact that I was in need of him to do something. And that can be a whole nother episode, this idea of need and how that controls us. All right, so allowing what is, allowing life to unfold, trusting in something greater even. We talk about that, having faith, and how being present, releasing control, and allowing really is an act of faith. Or it's simply accepting reality provides the clarity, the strength, and the peace that we need to move through life with grace. Reality is what's happening right now in this moment. And all of it's allowed. Remember, I talked about how what's happening right here in this moment is the tension that I feel in my arms. Also, what's happening right now in this moment is that I'm doing the dishes. We just become real present. So let me tell you, I wanted to expand on this topic because I want to encourage it. I want to encourage it because I've experienced it. I'm not just blowing hot air. I've experienced the freedom that belongs to the practice of letting go. And it's so challenging at first, but you just go through the steps and you take yourself through them, and you can find somebody to hold your hand, whether it's a coach or a therapist or a mentor, a friend. Hold your hand through the processes, and you begin to get better. And I mean better at being an allowance, better at being present with what is, and better, healthier. You feel better. Those tensions have released. They've been acknowledged. They've been worked through. They've been rewritten. The program isn't the same anymore. The program doesn't run with this rigidity and this tightness that's choking out your growth and your potential. And you have all you need. The vitality is within you because you're just cleaning the mistletoe off bit by bit. So in effort to practice what I preach, I have to tell you what I did in that moment of the skin crawling and pushing the sun out the door. I took the pause, and it wasn't easy. And I also did recognize that in that pause, I knew I was tired. I knew I'd woken earlier than is typical and gone to bed later than is typical. So I knew that that also was not helping my body to have space and patience. And when I recognized that the fear lied in the fact that these boys might not come back because my son's taking so long, and then I would have to entertain him, or eventually if he keeps doing this kind of thing, the boys won't ever come back and he'll be lonely. He won't have friends. That was easy for me to talk myself off that cliff because it was clear to see how untrue those results were going to be. But I will tell you that the sensations in my arms and hands took effort in like breathing into them and being like, okay, I know I feel this way right now, but I know that if I behave this way, where I keep pushing, it won't make for a happy outcome. And what I can do in this moment right now is just recognize I feel this way and recognize I don't want to have the unhappy outcome. It doesn't make the sensations go away and make it easy to be in that allowance, but it does produce a better outcome. And it helps to show my body that even though I felt this way, we're safe. We didn't die. Nothing bad happened. Nothing bad happened to the sun, and everything's okay. And through that process, time and time again, that kind of trigger gets less and less. And when we're tired and when we're hungry, that even works too. It works where we can just recognize we're tired and hungry. And this is why I'm acting this way. And so I know that I have control over myself and don't have to act this way. I have control over myself because I've discovered what's driving these sensations and this need to get my son outside. If you have any curiosity around why our body is able to release and is able to rewire and create a new experience, let me know. And I have a couple episodes I can shoot your way, and I can expand upon that even further with tools and practices. Just let me know where your curiosity lies on Instagram or in the YouTube comments or wherever you're listening to this episode. I hope that gives everybody some hope and some curiosity to kind of like step in, dip your toe into being present, into being allowing, in the sense that you just like, here's what's going on right now. And you're just stating it very clearly, whether you're stating a trigger and how it feels, or whether you're stating what you're doing that's very mundane. In order to keep yourself from encouraging states of stress and states of fear by our thoughts looping. Just dip your toe, give it a try, begin real simply. Okay, before I go, I wanted to let you all know to keep watch. I have a series coming out that I'm very passionate about that I'm doing with a previous guest named Hillary Stark. She's a tantric embodiment coach, and we are going to talk about sexual reclamation. It's going to be our sexual reclamation series. It's going to be a 4-part series. The first episode is going to be about embodiment and safety with root healing. And second episode is sexual trauma and teaching children their sexual power. The third episode is our sex episode, and we're going to talk about sexual shame that covertly diffuses our culture and is the root of so much suffering. And then last, episode 4 is going to be about living a life that's true for you through living a truly embodied way. Please let me know what it is you want to hear and what you are curious about. What are your questions? What are your wonderings in this area of sexual reclamation? I would love to be able to take some time to address y'all's wonderings, y'all's questions about this. So if you do have a question, you can email me at Thereclamation.malia at gmail. That link is in the show notes. You can also DM me on Instagram. That link is in the show notes. Thank you all so much for being here. If you want to dive even deeper into the somatic practice of being present and allowing, again, you know where my email is. You know where my DM is in Instagram. I have a few spots for private coaching sessions available, and you can just reach out to me for more details. Have a great week until the next.